The Brave Space podcast is devoted to the meeting of body and spirit. In a culture of shared respect and love for the life force that moves through us, we move, feel, dance, breathe, touch, and sing in somatic ecstatic prayer. Brave Space is the place of belonging, safe enough to take the risk of being vulnerable. Hello, and welcome to the Brave Space podcast. I am your host, Matthew Nelson. In this episode, we get to talk with Jane Hawley. Jane is the director of the dance program at Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. And she does it quite a bit differently than how the mainstream dance arts academic movement has been held. And she's been doing it a long time, 25 years, holding this program. And she does it entirely from a somatic perspective, including contact improvisation. And she brings this essence of the life force and spirit into the question of what it is to be an artist. How do we love our bodies as dance artists? She makes it so relevant. And this just speaks to my heart. I also ran a small liberal arts college dance program for 3 years, and I modeled it after hers because what I saw was that she was bringing meaning to people's lives beyond just the form and inclusive of the form. Why I'm here speaking to you on this podcast is because there's this movement happening with somatics in our culture to feel and move our bodies and connect and trust, to listen to the divine that comes through. And to get to talk with Jane about this, I think it's a really rich episode. We're going to cover a little bit of what this dance world is. And then we'll start cutting through that with pieces that I think are so relevant to everybody. And that is the essence of the conversation. So without further ado, here is Jane and the work she calls Movement Fundamentals. Welcome, Jane. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you for Brave Space.
Oh, it's a joy. I figured we might just start by getting some context from you about movement fundamentals, about what that means to you, this body of work that you've been immersed in creating for so very long and so deeply.
Yeah, well, it started with intentional questions of how can I train dancers as artists and empower people to love and feel gratitude for their bodies. I entered into dance in my college years. So at 19, I started dancing and I loved it. I loved it. And I also knew I wanted to explore more than style-based dancing.
What's a style?
Steps. So I originally started training in ballet, modern, jazz, tap, musical theater. So that was in college. And then I pursued further study through the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater certificate program. And that was in New York. And so received Graham technique, more ballet, Horton jazz, and Catherine Dunham technique, improvisation, things like that. And I really, really loved that work. And also while I was there, I was noticing how many dancers treated their bodies. And it was a conundrum for me because they had these beautiful instruments, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not just saying just dancers in New York, I mean everywhere. Yeah, so they have these beautiful instruments and the food and the way they spoke, how they cared or didn't care for their bodies became an interesting conundrum. Eventually, I went to get my Master's of Fine Arts from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana and was introduced to the dark procedures and Alexander technique and through Becky Nettlefield's work, which you might know that name,
I
Alexander
do.
and Feldenkrais.
These are
Uh,
all just for context for those of you who may not have any context for these things. The first range of things she spoke to were all these different teachers in the dance lineages. And then now she's speaking to lineages within somatics. And a lot of our contemporary somatics experience is, some of you may be coming to it through the psychological realms. And yet this wave was all very physical. So the lessons were physical. And so there was a lot of mixture between dance and somatics. That's kind of been the case for a number of years through our generations and before. And now it's coming into the mainstream. So just a little context there for those of you who don't have it.
Thank you, Matthew. That's so important. Yeah, Mabel Ellsworth Todd and Andrea Olson's work and Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen's work and Ida Rolf's work. And, just so many, I was introduced to so many of these somatic body-based practitioners in the 90s. I actually got very, very sick my final year there. I had been traveling and performing across the United States, and I got hepatitis A, so that's foodborne. And I just didn't know I was sick. I had this low-grade fever, and then pretty soon I look really jaundiced, and then pretty soon I'm in the emergency room and I'm hospitalized. And I started working with different forms of recovery, from dandelion root tea to integrated respiratory technique to Alexander technique. When I was released, the doctors were afraid that my liver would never recover. And in 3 months, it recovered 100% through these practices. I became really, really curious about how to access the body somatically to find our authentic artistry and movement vocabulary, especially. And then I started working with kids with different abilities, people with no limbs, people who were elderly. And I went up to Traverse City, Michigan, and was really involved with community there, as well as the Interlochen professional training program at Interlochen Dance Arts Academy in Traverse City. And I kept seeing this over and over, that we all have our own authentic movement vocabulary. And I started just identifying that as artistry. And the more we grew, the more we were trained out of that and into other habits and patterns that maybe weren't authentically ours.
So all these styles that you studied, the Graham and Horton and Dunham, these are specific vocabularies that are taught to a body, right? Choreographed on a body. And you found a curiosity of, as you're working with all these other people, there must be something else, something more authentic underneath this. And I also hear a curiosity of, how does that meet this way of taking care of our bodies that I heard you speak to, that people studying all these set techniques, there was some way where they seemed, I'm hearing, maybe dissociated or not quite involved in themselves as a body. Is that
beautifully articulated. Yes.
So
yeah.
As you went into these somatic techniques, what started forming for you?
Guided improvisation through concepts, imagery, memory, any of the senses, right? Also the imagination, and also anatomical exploration of different aspects of our body or nervous system or skeletal system. And I found also contact improvisation around that time. And I was working, my favorite work was with children 3 to 7 year olds at Leelanau Children's Center, and then also going to Interlochen Arts Academy, because I had this diverse and very huge spectrum of bodies to play with and experiment with, of how to create movement vocabulary or performance pieces that came out of their bodies. So the movement vocabulary came from
Mm.
them. And it was how they interpreted concepts or how they explored their anatomy and what they were doing to form the movement vocabulary. So not teaching them to dance like me or through steps, but through concepts.
Yeah. And that's when you talk about movement vocabulary, maybe just I think I know what that means, but I'd love if you spoke to what's movement vocabulary.
Well, I think how each of us talk with words, right? I
Mhm.
think each of us have movement patterns that are original to our fascia, to our experiences.
OG movement.
And capturing that to me is the beginning of artistry, of seeing that person's artistry, the very special things that
Mm.
they bring that no one else really can do. Maybe we mimic, but really they're originating out of the tissue and the body and the lived experience.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you for that. And so I'm curious what you've seen also as people, and this is coming from my dancer, history here, of what happens to people when they do go into, say, a performance of someone else's choreography after they've been studying in this way? What have you seen?
So over the 20, well, going into my 25th year here, right, working with dancers maybe who came to Luther College with 12 to 16 years of traditional styles-based training, and people who never had danced before, like I had when I went to college, when they're all in the same classroom, right? Going through movement fundamentals 1, 2, or 3, or contact improvisation, they're finding that the people who have traditional training are expanding, and they're finding out why they were injured and how to recover. And the people who have not been trained are finding out how innovative they are.
Mm.
And then the other part of when these people go into to take classes with traditional training or return to their studios, maybe, right? They're finding that because of going into the body and letting the body fuel the movement, they have more ease because of this
Mm.
amount of understanding of tension for the task needed to execute the task, right? A lot of times when we're trying, we go overboard and we carry more tension.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm
And when
watching
we're
you as you speak about that, and your shoulders kind of came up and your chest
yeah,
froze, and there was, yeah, in me this sense of like needing to come meet you in this moment of anxiety.
yeah,
And that yeah, if that were happening on stage, I might be worried as an
right.
audience member versus like being able to witness someone and feel a deeper kind of calm or resonance or play.
Yeah, it's like when we're practicing somatic patterning, less tension creeps in
Mm.
because we're not trying from the outside, right? It's more of birthing from the inside, and it feels like there's a sense of affirming the authentic patterning to make whatever shape is wanting to be expressed.
What I'm being struck by as we're talking about this is the relevance to just all our lives. So here we are in the frame of artistry, that there's this ability to be more genuine, and life is all artistry, right? To be showing up in the world from this place of creativity, from this place of uh, it could be so many things. I suppose the next question to you is, yeah, what's artistry? Like, what does that mean for you? Such a lovely way that you've been using the term.
Well, when I was in college, so 19, when I was finally starting to dance, and I had danced on a dirt road where I grew up on a farm, right? But that was all by myself. And and I was just making things up. But there were images in my head. So then when I finally started to receive training in college, I was a little perplexed about it, but I thought, well, it's a way in. Maybe I'm not finding what I'm still imagining, but maybe it's a way in. I'm learning. But there was a quote that I found in the co-op, Donna J. Stone, the most visible creators I know of are those artists whose medium is life itself, the ones who express the inexpressible without brush, hammer, clay, or guitar. They neither paint nor sculpt. Their medium is being. Whatever their presence touches has increased life. Donna J. Stone. And that's the dancer, I think, right? The one, the body.
Yeah.
So we're all dancers.
So I'm hearing you speak to artistry as being attuned to what's coming through us.
I think inherently
Yeah.
we are creators. Inherently we are artists. We come from creative energy, right? We come from artistic chaos order.
Yeah. Do you have students who come in believing they're not artists?
Yes.
What happens when you meet that? How do you meet that? Because I bet there are people listening who are like, well, here we are talking about artists. I'm not an artist. What happens? How do you engage with that?
Well, they transform. Because it's almost like when you're like your brave space, Matthew, you're creating a space for them to thrive, to be brave, right? And all these 10 principles. So with movement fundamentals, I have 6 paired principles and 10 tenets of practice and the 4 phases. And so as they continually are crossing the threshold into the barefoot studio and looking out at nature, which is diverse and working in collaboration, right? They too start to see themselves as diverse yet human. And I'm just speaking to them all the time as artists, all the time. And so over the course of practicing or reading the texts that we read or the practices that we do or the performances that they make, they really quickly, I think, start to believe that they've forgotten and that they are, right? And then they become even more creative because once you have that affirmation or the brave space or the creative space or the space that says yes to all bodies, it's a transformation back into themselves. So over the 25 years now, it's, to me, movement fundamentals is a development of selfhood and not adulthood, not childhood, but selfhood. And how we, So there's a lot of testimonies that have been written over the 25 years we're starting.
I believe it.
Yeah.
This process of becoming who we are, it's such an interesting question to me of like, what is transformation? Like there are transformation workshops and there are books on personal transformation. And here we are talking about artistry and becoming ourselves. And to me, one of the things I speak of with the principle of transformation in Brave Space is meeting our patterns. And you're speaking to that we are these patterned beings, right? There's movement vocabulary that's authentic to us and able to transform, able to change. And as you're taking people through a journey, right? Movement fundamentals, 1, 2, 3, and CI and performance, all this work that these students get to do with you. Are there pieces of how you guide them into transformation? And what's that journey look like piece by piece? And if there are there must be landmarks because you're working through it so systematically.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, there are landmarks. Depending on who, say you're starting with a body that has not considered themselves a dancer, right? The 4 phases practice. So that's phases of prepare, move, dance, and witness with specific questions in each phase that gives guidance to the practitioner and then documentation. And so a lot of times when they enter that 4 phases, the first hurdle is not knowing what to do from the outside and listening to the inside, letting the body guide. the
Mm,
process. And so quieting the mind or the brain, right? The social construct of brain, and listening to feeling, sensation, imagery, the tension and pull of your anatomy or your
mm,
nervous system. And so I think that is a lovely, lovely way in, but it's challenging because there's most of us think that we have to be taught how to do something right.
mm. And you're
And so
speaking
that,
to improvisation here, right? Like
yes,
that's the essence
that's the
is this
essence.
space between what's known and what's not known.
Yes, beautiful.
How are
Yeah.
you how do you give people enough known to step into the unknown? Like I'm hearing it in some like prepare, move, dance, witness, even as a structure, I guess gives a known. And then
And
you
then
can,
questions. How do you begin? What
ah,
is important? What is needed? Say
ah,
we're exploring the heart chakra or something,
mm-hmm.
right? Or say
Yeah.
we're exploring the iliopsoas, or say we're exploring memory and
Mhm.
even a traumatic one, right? So
Yeah.
we can use the four phases as a way in to explore that specific concept or arena. And from that, movement vocabulary will come out of them
Mm,
just naturally. And so then to start affirming that is creating dance, that is making movement, right? That is creating performance. The beginning, where does this live then? And so I feel like, yeah, the four phases is a wonderful key. And then the principles can start to guide them into their own anatomy. And so maybe they're exploring why their femoral joint is so tight. And
mm,
then they start to have memories, or I'll guide them into memories of activities that they did growing up, or how did their parents move.
mm. Wow. Beautiful.
Yes. And then contact improvisation, we learn that we can soften and pour for the give and take.
Mm,
And that if we align weight through our skeleton, it's not about strength, right? It's just about
mm.
aligning and softening and expanding or condensing.
So contact improv, just a little context here for people who don't know, is this form where there's a meeting of two bodies in touch, in connection. I love to play with contact improv. It's something that sometimes it's energetic touch. You may not even come into physical touch all the time, but there's this relating, and oftentimes it's completely physical and weight is shared, so one person's weight is being carried by another. So this talk about strength, there are some lifts and positions in contact improvisation, and they're not, sometimes people teach them, but oftentimes they just arise where you could have someone's full weight on your shoulder or something. And Jane, you're speaking so beautifully to how it may arise without a need for this crazy amount of strength. It's not like going to the gym and lifting that amount of weight because it's two
Yeah.
live bodies in their interaction. So I feel like I interrupted, but I wanted to give some context. You were speaking to in contact improv that there's a kind of intelligence that builds, maybe. I want to
Yes.
hand it back to you about.
Well, I love listening to how you're. Yeah, I think again it's a way to explore one's own natural movement patterns. Again, without being told what to do,
Mm,
but drawing out from our lived experiences how we interact or how we hold and why, as you start to release and give weight, again, reminds me of a brave space. The ability to respond versus react is also trained, I think, in the form of contact improvisation.
yeah. To respond versus react. Say a little more about the difference there. I'd love to hear your
Well,
take on
when,
that.
say, for example, you're doing an exploration where one person is just giving different types of qualitative touch, and the other person, say, is blindfolded, and the person who is blindfolded is free to either move toward that touch or move away. And so they are immediately engaged with memory or
Mm,
sensation from their entire time of being alive, right? It's all housed in that body, and they're starting to understand which things they're attracted to and which things they're not attracted to without judgment.
Mm,
And then to be able to go into that space after maybe practicing that and then switching roles, right?
yeah.
Where they do the initiative touching and qualitative touching, and then their partner responds. After that practice and engagement and reciprocity, there becomes immediate intelligence, I think, about awareness of, oh my gosh, why do we do these things? Why do we react versus consider? Yeah. And so I think very quickly, contact improvisation teaches that response ability of the ability to respond rather than react.
Yeah.
And
It's,
awareness, I think awareness is another one of yours. Heart centered. Yeah.
yeah.
Risk.
Yeah. Yeah. We're in this, and a lot of these principles for me came out of contact improvisation just as a practice. I'm like, what is it, as I was bringing it into studios where, I bet some of the people are listening are like, whoa, and you go in an academic classroom, you're touching each other and doing these explorations. I mean, some people have only done that in tantra workshops,
You're
if
rolling.
that.
You're rolling on students.
Rolling on students, right? Yeah. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. This isn't
2000 at
even,
Luther. Yeah.
yeah, this
Yeah.
isn't, this isn't like
Yeah.
it is cutting
Can't be.
edge, but it's not the first day of it by any means. My reason for doing this podcast is in many ways to bring this physical somatic information out, the understanding that can actually be quite normal to do a
Yeah.
touch investigation with
Right.
someone, that happens in classrooms and has happened for a long time. It's been behind such closed doors. And, people are in yoga studios on their mats doing warrior one and warrior two and down dog and all these beautiful practices, right? There's so much coming in. And then what happens when we step off the mat? I want to kind of zoom in on one of the pieces that's at the core of your work. The fourth phase is witness. I think it's so important to understand, like in these touch explorations, in the work that you're doing, this isn't done in isolation. This is done in community and communion.
Right.
And that's a key,
Even
right?
nature, right? Even nature, animal, space. Because if you really think that we're partnered, just the awareness of who am I partnering with? Maybe it's the air as I walk or dance through space, right? It just becomes such a way into awareness that we are not alone. We
Mm,
are with multiple intelligences, and our body is extremely intelligent, and it's our primary source for engagement with the cosmos, with the bacteria.
yeah. And the human piece too. What do you see happen to people as they investigate this with others? And maybe if you can speak to how you see witness as a phase. What does witness mean
Mm.
for your work?
So because that's really how I started to learn how to dance was by witnessing a lot of people.
Mm,
I think that became a crucial. And then I love witnessing nature, animals, and babies. And it might be because they're such authentic states, right? They're not trying to impress, they're just being themselves. And so witnessing, I think, shows patterns, extraordinary artistic patterns in nature. Animals show incredible intellectual communicative patterns with their bodies without words. And then babies are just phenomenally growing at extraordinary rates, assimilating the world with such curiosity and witnessing. They're not speaking, right? They're just taking it in as witness. So how are you watching? What do you look for? What do you see are the prompts. And so it gives you this reflective cognitive way of going, wow, how am I watching? Am I proximate? Am I above? Am I below? Am I far away from? Am I am I watching with judgment or am I watching with curiosity? How am I watching? What do I look for? That prompts me into, am I always looking for the same thing? And what am I missing? Right. And then what do you see? Oh, I'm seeing something that I didn't expect, that I wasn't looking for. And so it puts me into this great realm of artistic playground
Yeah.
for creating work, for making work, for responding as a work of art.
Yeah. And as I'm listening, what's coming for me is the sense that it doesn't really matter whether someone goes to become a professional artist or whatever, that the skills you're speaking to are about how we create the world we live in. That
Right. And going, right. The
if we're
human. Like,
yeah, if we're able to be with each other from that place of how am I watching? How am I being with? How am I witnessing myself?
yeah.
Then there's this ability to create. Mark Gaffney has this incredible book about Eros, and he
Oh,
he opens Eros up to look at the principles that are modeled by our sexuality, but are so much bigger than it, and in speaking to this creative drive, this ability to create lovingly, right? And so, how we witness each other, can we witness each other in a loving, creative way? Feels like the question that is right there in this material you're speaking to, in the classroom, in the
yeah.
studio, and then in life.
Right. Yeah. Permission. And it also becomes a great gift when bodies in the room become comfortable enough that they are allowing themselves to be witnessed. So there's that vulnerability piece and the empathy that comes from that relationship. So we then, we transcend our own experience because we're connecting to another's experience as well. But it
Mm,
becomes a great,
mm.
it's such a great gift when somebody allows themselves to be witnessed, I think, too.
There's in belonging to me, belonging and authenticity and vulnerability are this triangle for me,
Mm.
where there's a belonging that happens when we allow ourselves a certain level of vulnerability. And what's so challenging there is it wouldn't be vulnerable if we couldn't get hurt.
Yeah,
It wouldn't be vulnerable if it didn't just bring all the danger, all the fear right there. And looking at the value of performance outside of a thing, outside of a dance concert, which
exactly.
it's somehow, I hear you speaking to the authenticity and performance, which almost feel like opposites. There's a tension happening there. And yet,
Yeah,
if we can dive into both,
right.
how
The
we're being,
extraordinary in the mundane or
mm,
the ordinary, right? Which I think all of us get that. It's not a new concept, but the how can we train? How can we practice more so that we are bringing our whole self, our artistic whole self, right? Inherently artists to every moment. Yeah, I'm really interested in that.
it is just as you speak to this prepare, move, dance, and witness. I love those phases. And that dancing isn't a product in that. It's just a phase that we might slide in and out of in our way of being together, and that there's an artistry in living and being in community that generates belonging that's just kind of sorely missing in our culture. This tribal intelligence of how our nervous systems meet and co-regulate and create something bigger than the individual. And you're speaking to it all in the work that you do. And then there's this place where, how does this just live in the world without it always needing to create a performance? I love performances can be beautiful. And there's
Everywhere.
yeah. Yeah, what is it everywhere? I'm
Yeah,
curious, when you walk around in shops or, at the co-op, or wherever, do you see choreographies form? What is it to
right.
witness the world through your eyes in that regard? What do
I
you
mean,
pick
your
up?
question is because you must know. You must
Yeah.
know then, right?
Yeah.
Because the one who has the question has the answer
Love that.
everywhere. Yeah.
Mm,
everywhere. There's possibilities of performances that are going on, and utter utter artistry around us. It's wild, especially the more we get wild, you
mm,
know.
mm,
Or maybe wild is just being ourselves rather than so socially, culturally civilized, right? Or
mm. Yeah. What is wild?
what is wild? Yeah, is wild, the most uninhibited expressivity of being oneself.
Hearing you say that, then I'm struck by the way that in the midst of holding the wild, we're holding the wild. Like this work of somatics and artistry is like the container to make that wildness possible so that if you go in the middle of the street and just go into a conniptive fit, that may not serve, right? That could get you run over by a car. It could get your head hit on the pavement. It could, people would think you were weird, da 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 da. But held in the right container, what if we had five people holding that person so that they could go into their complete wildness and not hit their head on the pavement and be seen, witnessed, held by those people? What's the power of being able to witness that wildness and see it cared for? Just this image in my head. And I love how you talk about images too. Like
Yeah, right.
the
Okay,
way
you
we're
you
holding the wildness.
you just reminded me of something else. The Walter Mitty, The Secret Life, is it The Secret Life of Happiness?
Oh, I've heard of it vaguely, but I'm not.
Yeah. Beautiful things don't ask for attention. It's when he's the photographer in that film, waiting to capture a photo of a snow leopard. And so this idea of, yes, thrashing wild, but also this snow leopard, it's so quiet and it only comes out, and it's very slow, but it's so wild. And he says that quote, beautiful things don't ask for attention. But it made me think of wild in another way, of how when we're rewilding ourselves, I'm wondering, it's a way to also step away from the social cultural constructs, maybe, right? But not
Okay.
that we would ever let go. They're with us all the time, but that we're just balancing out this somatic interior container of holding and holding within, holding without,
Mhm.
of this real somatic wildness, nature, artistic beauty. Yeah.
I think about how many people say to me that they are out of touch with their bodies, don't know how to feel their bodies, aren't in connection with their bodies. And so this process of rewilding, it's got to be a bit like meeting someone else. So when I think back to my process with it, and I'm kind of used to it, right? We've been doing this a long time. So the wild, it's like, oh, there's that piece. At first, that's shocking to come in contact with.
I love what you just said. Rewilding. So within ourselves, it's a bit like meeting someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's probably not so much transformation, but it's reformation, or
Mm,
you're bringing back parts, bringing up parts that maybe have not been brought up for a while, or fun.
we haven't touched that deeply on spirit. And I think it might be fun as we're getting into this, like, who is that? Who's part of me? And what's coming through this body to just touch on what is spirit when we talk about something coming through, what's coming through for those who haven't improvised and come in to your classroom? What is it to discover there's something there when I stop thinking? You have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that? What is
Well,
spirit?
is spirit soul, or is spirit energy that animates? Are those the same? I don't
Mm,
know. I think of energy, maybe sometimes, you're practicing and you really just want to be alone, right? And
Mm,
go deep into to the psychic body or the energy body and address or listen to or move from those places that maybe you didn't know, right, were there either through triggered through memory or sensation or touch
mm.
or imagery or story or anatomy, right? Or it's if injury, things like
So
that.
any of these things I'm getting may trigger something from the past that in these times we often talk about as like trauma with a small t or sometimes a big T, but a
Yeah,
pattern from the past that may be uncomfortable to meet. You know, it might get
maybe.
triggered by an image of anatomy. You talked earlier about iliopsoas, and I wanted to speak to like that's the deepest muscle in the torso. So a lot
Right,
of things eh, may be kind of triggered by meeting the actual feeling of the psoas, for
right,
example.
right.
And then,
But if we go to energy animates as or energy as spirit,
mm,
right?
mhm,
Um, I'm wondering, I don't know, but I am wondering that when you're practicing in this way, like Brave Space or through movement fundamentals, no matter if you think of yourself as a dancer or a dentist, right? It's that you have your body all the time. And if you're considering your energy or your spirit as essential to
mm,
animating and creating, I would think that would also be an element of artistry, right? Because our spirit, I would think they're all different, very unique.
yeah,
DNA,
something individual.
you talk about risk, you are going to die. So when we know this, we know we're going to die and we can start thinking about that as an invitation to how we want to die
Mm,
or how our soil body returns back to the soil home of the earth.
yeah.
I don't know. Tell me, you tell me.
Well, I heard you speak to when we know we are going to die, and what came up for me is then we can step into how we want to live. Spirit, we can't quite talk about it directly, right? In energy, what's energy? So many definitions and ideas about energy. But
Yeah,
so what's here for me is this sense that in the place between life and death, this magical surprise that we're here when my eyes are willing to open to it, then just this animating force that comes through that's a surprise, that's one of discovery. And I love how comfortable you are saying I don't know, and that's actually culturally not normative to be
right.
willing to hold the unknown like that. That's the improvisation piece, the
Yeah,
risk that's inherent in showing up to improvisation. And improvisation is at the core of the practices we both are engaged with here, where I would say our practices of brave space and movement fundamentals are more similar than they are different in the cultural
right.
scheme, right?
Absolutely.
It's about showing up to this improvisation piece, this unknown, and there's a spiritual texture. And you said something just in our we did a little prep call, to just check in on what would we talk about. And you said something I loved so much. See if I can find it. A way of investigating body as primary source material.
Yeah.
That's what movement fundamentals is. It's what the somatic way of working with artistry is. The body as primary source material. Take that for a moment, and then I have something to add.
Well, I just feel that then is the investigation of the spirit as it animates the body, right? It will leave, but it's here now.
Mm, beautiful. Yes.
It's manifested. It is informed. This is the realm of manifestation on the physical realm.
Yeah.
What a gift.
Hmm. Yes. The way that I've been thinking about this is treating the body as a spiritual text, like the way that we treat the Torah or the Bible or the Quran or it has a specific form, but it's way open to interpretation. So the somatic journey, the somatic spiritual journey, is the one of recognizing I am the only one who can interpret it for this body, because no
Right.
one else gets the view I get of this body. No one else gets to experience the sensations this body offers. No one else has this, and somatics is this first person viewpoint of the body. It's the experience of it in movement and awareness. And so spirit coming through is like this text that I can read. It doesn't mean I'm going to get the interpretation right. It doesn't mean there is a right interpretation. And then here we get to compare notes about the way we interpret this or that. And in witnessing, we get to take in others and kind of bring it through our system. So this idea of primary source material, yeah, it's right
Right.
there. It's primary source, connected to spirit.
Thank you. That was
Mhm.
beautiful.
Yeah. Thanks for the collaboration on that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you feel like people should know about this way of being that is movement fundamentals, that is brave space? Again, more similar than they are different. So many beautiful differences too. But what someone who'd never come across it before, what would you want them to know?
I honestly think it's a way into experiencing oneself as artistic and as a creative being. It's a way in, and there are many platforms, right? But this one really does specifically center the body as primary source and the body as artistic, creative, spiritual. Um, so it's a paradigm that is shifting creativity to be inherently within
Mm,
and collaborative.
mm,
In 2012, there was interest in certification process, and and today everybody goes through it in their own way, and no one does the same thing.
mm,
And so that's the other part that I'm really, really enjoying and surprised about is again, it's constantly saying we're all using the same paradigm, but we're expressing it very, very differently.
mm, mm,
And that feels really, really good. Going back to how to train dancers as artists and empower people to love and feel gratitude for their body. If we think all of us are dancers, all of us are artists, no matter what it is, our medium, we're bringing our full expressive body as primary source
mm, mm.
to live, right? To
Yeah.
to be who we are and nobody else.
Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I'm here is this prayer that we can keep living on this planet, that there will be a planet for my son, and that my son will be able to have a family, and that there will be that human life will become more beautiful and contribute and be more and more generative to the whole, because we have an overall economy and way of being on the planet that's using it up, right? That's not generative. I'm forgetting the word I'm looking for.
Reciprocal. I mean, even the
Yeah.
reciprocal relationship with the earth, it's it gives all the time. Yeah. Right. I think you're doing a really good job of talking about that relationship, right?
As are
How
you.
are
Thank you.
Yeah, how are we giving back to this magnificent realm, this
And
energy realm?
and so the artistry of which you speak is a giving back, right? It's
Yes.
generating beauty, and as that vibration and way of being goes out, then it's magnetic. And I think that's why there's contact improvisation starting to show up in all the cities at all the ecstatic dances, is because there's something in the way of being together that's a level more divine. It's a level more, organized in its authenticity. The source comes through and we're able to meet. And the more that we're able to meet this way with each other, the more we're able to meet in the whole of a living earth community. And it's a giant mystery. We only know what we know. So most of it's unknown, and it's forming. The artistry of the earth is forming through us. And there are times I get down on all this stuff. I'm like, why does it matter how we dance together? It matters because it is this vibration, and it's the clouds to meet. And we both watched Joshua Schrey's podcast, The
Yeah.
Emerald, and he did a piece on clouds that was really
Oh,
beautiful,
yeah.
speaking to the animacy. So
Nice.
such a delight.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, very much.
If people want to find your work, how would they do it?
Movementfundamentals.org.
Awesome.
O-R-G. Yeah. Thank you so much, Matthew. It's such a pleasure, and I love your work.
Oh, thank you. I know
Yeah.
yours. Yeah. It'd be fun to be in the same place sometime.
I feel that happening soon. It's
Cool.
brewing.
That'd be lovely. I hope so.
Yeah.
Mm.
Be well.
Thank you. You too,
Dance.
Ethan. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep dancing.